Hey everybody, and welcome to episode something something. What is it this week? 128, episode 128 of the Self Publishing Roundtable. I am your moderator, Xavier Granville, because Wade Finnegan is a Wade. He's a Wade.
Drinking mojitos.
He's a Wade drinking mojitos with other parents and other. He's doing a teacher conference tonight. He's doing work like a real man. Um,
Likely story.
Yes, I know. And Liam Kingman is away as well. He is unfortunately sick with pneumonia. It's nothing too severe, but we wish him a steady recovery. And otherwise, with me, as always, is the lovely Erica Conroy.
Thank you.
Lovely, lovely. Joining us on the panel as a guest moderator this week, we have a good friend of the podcast, Robert Chaz Shute. He's throwing up the peace sign for those on audio. He's a hippie like that.
It's true.
Yes. And back for his second appearance on the show, we are lucky to be joined by Chris Fox.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for coming back there, Chris. So let me just bring up some of the questions here that we've got for you. Chris is known for both for writing nonfiction and for writing fiction. He has a couple individual series, both in the sci-fi thriller categories as far as his fiction stuff. But he also has now a third book out in his, I guess, nonfiction trilogy geared towards authors. He had 5,000. Book geared towards writing faster, a geared book towards marketing, and now this one is putting it all together of writing to market. So yeah, exciting.
You want me to start?
Yes, so I can bring up the questions.
So, Chris, what's the backstory behind the new book? Why write to market?
Why write to market? So my first series, I got really lucky, and I accidentally wrote it to market. It played really well. It stuck right around 6,000 in terms of rank on the Amazon store, and I was selling copies like hotcakes. So I made the mistaken assumption that I was onto something by writing sort of genre-bending series, and I wrote a second series. The first book is called Hero Born, and I billed it as a cross between Heroes and X-Files. And got really excited. I'm thinking, this is going to do great. You know, Heroes Reborn is on the air, and X-Files is going to launch again. And then I put the book out, and it fell on its face. Just totally fell on its face. Heroes Reborn was canceled. X-Files launched, and people are hating the first few episodes that are out. And the book didn't do it all well. So I had to take a big step back and ask myself why. And the reason was I didn't write to market. I wrote and then marketed. So I didn't make sure that there was a group of people that would be interested in this book first. And at the same time I released, Domino Finn put out his series. It started with a book called Dead Man, and he was very, very careful to hit all the tropes. It's like a slightly darker version of the Dresden Files. A great book if you haven't read it yet. And so I sort of watched how that was embraced by the marketplace, and mine was not. And I started doing some thinking about why that was. I did a little bit of research into the market. I looked at a bunch of other authors that I know, people like Katie Vance and Don McKenna, that had sort of made the switch from writing what they originally wanted to write over to writing to market series they thought would have an audience, and I watched them all go from, you know, making $50 a month to making 5 figures, and realized that that was something that I could do too. So I've done my homework. I was dared by an author that I trust who makes 6 figures a month to...
Ooh, was that Amanda M. Lee?
Was not, although she makes a great living. She's one of the people on board with this, but this is a gentleman, a mysterious gentleman by the name of Aaron. Aaron doesn't like to give his last name out, and Aaron is a pen name, so it's not even his real name. But he's taught myself and quite a few other authors a lot more about writing to market, and has challenged me to write a novel in a genre of my choosing. I chose military science fiction. In 2 weeks, he has convinced me that editing, I'm putting too much time and effort and money into that, so he thinks just a proofreader is fine. Don't send it out for developmental edits. Package it up, make sure it hits all the tropes, and if I'm worried that it's not going to be as high quality as I'd like, put it out under a pen name, which I've decided to do, and he claims that it should do really well. So I've sort of crafted my experience, and this experiment will be launched a few weeks after Right to Market. And so in 2 or 3 months' time, we'll find out if I can really put my money where my mouth is and sell this series by writing to market.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're skipping on the editing step as far as that's concerned. But then again, I suppose if you're trying to write to market and you're really delivering on that end, you are going to be trying to stick to a faster release schedule, and therefore at least trying to cut back on editing time would definitely help you get a large sum of words every 90 days.
Yeah, it's interesting that Aaron was able to convince me that was a good idea to at least try. So I typically go through 3 rounds of editing, where I'll do a developmental edit, a line edit, and then a proofreader. So, and that's after I've done 2 drafts myself. And I believed heavily in that process, but he pointed out that my very first novel was before I had really learned the value of editing, and so it was very poorly edited, and yet it's got a 4.6 review on Amazon with almost 200 reviews. It's got over 600 reviews on Audible, and people love this book despite the fact that it's flawed. So he said, well, if your first book was selling that great and you didn't do all that editing, why do you need to do it now? And I didn't have a good answer.
That's really interesting, because I was listening to a podcast earlier this week where, when you talk to editors about, well, do you think we need editors? And of course, the answer is yes, because if you don't ask a barber if you need a haircut. So, and I read an excerpt of Right to Market today, and one of the things you pointed out was something that I think about a lot is authors tend to talk to other authors, and we're very much, there's an echo chamber of what the accepted wisdom is, but what you're doing is going straight to the reader and in looking at what readers want. And a lot of readers, especially for particular genres, there are certain tropes that they expect and things they do care about very much and things they don't care about so much. And one of those things is if you've got a few typos, that's okay with them. What they're really into it for is story. It's something to be careful about, and I can see right now there are people's heads exploding over. It must be perfect. It must be awesome. But what I really liked about the excerpt of Right to Market is how you are really cutting through what I think is possibly the author's own bullshit. Because as I read your excerpt, I thought, well, I really see myself here. Because I am getting in my own way because I write what I want for me, and I'm not writing to market. For instance, I wrote my criminal autobiography, and the people, all 5 of them who've read it, love it. But one of the things that really stood out to me as I read your book, I remembered a review that said, I really love this, and I've never read anything quite like it. And I thought, oh, that's why it's not selling, because it's not like anything. It's, I guess in Nova Scotia we'd say we want the same thing, only different. And it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about in Right to Market is coming up with same thing, only different. Now, before anybody else's heads explode, first, put up your pegs, put down your gun, take some weed tea, go organic. Let's just hear them out and move on to that next question, which is on everybody's mind, which is, what's the difference between writing to market and selling out?
I think execution. So writing to market is figuring out sort of what readers are going to want and then giving it to them. And readers don't want to hear the same story over again. So if you were writing yourself a Hunger Games or a Harry Potter clone, I know YA is really hot in Hollywood right now, so quite a few people are trying to do that. No one's going to read your book. You and your mom, and that's going to be pretty much it, because they've read it before, they've heard it. So you have to hit the same tropes that they're interested in, but do so in a new, unique way. And you've got to write a great, compelling book. So craft is critical, whether you're writing to market or not. The difference there is you're writing something that people can say, oh, A is like B. So I liked A, which means that your book, which is B, I'm going to like that too. Selling out, I think, is trying to cash in on somebody else's IP and write something similar, maybe quick and sloppy, so that you can get some sales. And that does work in some cases, especially in nonfiction. But for fiction, people are a lot more discerning, I think, and they want an entertaining story. So if you try and sell out, they're going to know, and they're not going to buy your book. And if they do, you're going to get flamed in your reviews.
So my Gary Potter books, those are not going to do very well.
Depends. If you made that a comedy, it could sell extremely well.
Oh no, they're serious. There's no joke about Gary Potter.
Well, actually, reading the excerpt, one of the things that came to me was there's a series that I wrote. I've got 3 books in the series so far that I thought would be much more commercial. But now, after reading your excerpt, I'm thinking maybe I'm selling it wrong, because I said, it's very Buffy. And maybe that's telling people that it's like something they've already seen, which it's not. But it's got a strong female protagonist who's, the same ages, same kind of humor, all that stuff. But it really, after reading just that little bit, I've already pre-ordered the book, so you got a sale. I'm just I'm just telling everybody else they got to buy it too. Because it really gave me pause, even just with something that I've already done. How could I reposition it so maybe I'm just selling it wrong?
Yeah, and I'm taking the journey, I think, with everybody else, because I've been selling some of the same series that I write wrong, and it really is all about finding who is doing what you're doing successfully and then comparing your packaging to theirs. So if you're writing, like I'm writing this military fiction, the military science fiction, the big thing I needed to do was go find the people who are really successful at that and see what they're mentioning in their blurbs, what they're doing in their first few chapters, and kind of overall what their packaging looks like. Do they have a giant spaceship on their cover? And the answer, of course, is yes. If you try to break the mold and go in a different direction, you might succeed, and maybe you'll break out, but it's far more likely that people are just going to pass by your book because it doesn't look like what they expect, and they're not going to give it a chance. People have a super short attention span, especially with so many books out there.
Well, and maybe you could get a bit more into the analysis you do, because when you're looking at what's successful, you're not necessarily looking for something where you're getting a lot of competition. You're looking for the underserved reader. Could you talk a bit about that, Chris?
Absolutely. So you want to find a hungry genre, a genre where people like it and will buy it, but there's not enough books out there. And how you can tell that, most people are familiar, if you're an indie author, with your ranking on Amazon. So if you're looking at the top 100 in any given subgenre, I'm going to keep going back to this example of military sci-fi because it's what I'm researching currently, but this applies to everything from westerns to romance to epic fantasy. Go look at the #1 book in that category and see what its rating is. And if it's in the top 1,000, it's selling well. If you look at the #20 book in that same category, is it also in the top 1,000? If it is, it's probably a lightning hot genre, but it means there's a lot of competition. Ideally, what you want to see is the first place book, the #1, is in the top 1,000, but the #20 is all the way down at like 8 or 10,000. There's just not enough good books like the book in first place, and so there's definitely room for you to add something to that pile. So it's not saturated. So to give you some concrete examples, if you were to go look at the middle grade fantasy, at, say, Harry Potter, and look at the first 2 or 3 pages, so let's say the first 60 books, almost all of them are going to be ranked in the top 1,000. There are so many great series that are already out there that if you try breaking out, unless you get very, very lucky, you're going to have a tough time getting traction. If, on the other hand, you look at the genre that I picked, and I picked it for this reason, military science fiction, people are voracious readers of these books, but there's just not enough of them. And so if you put something out there and it looks and feels like what's already there, these people are going to snatch it up, and it should sail up the rankings if my theories are correct.
That's really interesting because I can think of a real world example from my books there too, because I've just finished a military sci-fi series, and it's complete and it's done, and it's not getting enough traction at the moment yet. I haven't done any Facebook ads for it or anything. But I think one of the issues with it is I focused on a robot apocalypse. And a few years ago there was the Robo Apocalypse book that was pretty popular. But beyond that, if you look up robots on Amazon, you get a whole bunch of kids' books.
Mm-hmm.
Or how to build a robot or that kind of stuff. So, I did something fun for me, but I'm going to have to work a lot harder to find my audience and market it after the fact, as opposed to identifying the readers, which is the premise of right to market.
Exactly. The tropes there, I think, are what matter. So the tropes for the type of military science fiction I'm writing are you've got to have humanity being overwhelmed by some sort of external threat. There's one ship led by a maverick captain with a misfit crew who is the only possibility of stopping it. And that's kind of the backdrop you need if you're going to mimic the rest of these books. Anything else you do with the series can be original and your own ideas, but if you don't hit those core tropes, then you're off the mark and you're not going to be appealing to the same audience.
Now, should people be thrown off by the naysayers? Because you gave a really great example about how people complained about a military sci-fi author who went too close to other material, according to a minority of reviewers, but they thought, "Oh, this is too much like Battlestar Galactica." So go ahead.
That's a good question. I guess it depends on your goal. I'm sure the author of that particular book, which people will learn more about if they read Right to Market, is laughing all the way to the bank. So you're going to see some negative reviews if you get some of the details wrong about the technology that you're using or weapons or military protocols, you're going to see a very vocal minority of people come out and you'll see negative reviews. But you'll also look and see that the vast majority of the reviews on that book, it's Nick Webb's Constitution, are very, very positive and people love it. And they love it because while it is very similar to Battlestar Galactica in some ways, and people can make that comparison, the enemies that they're fighting are unique. The overall plot is definitely different in quite a few respects. And so it hits that it's familiar, but it's also unique that I think you need to do in order to be successful.
And that's really interesting is the first point I think that we all have to remember is not to be thrown too much by negative reviews and take them too seriously immediately. But on the flip side of that, in Right to Market, you look at the 5-star reviews, but you also look at the 1-star reviews, which I think most authors, if it's a 1-star, like, to tell you the truth, I don't think I've read a whole lot of 1-star reviews that really struck me as pithy and useful. It's usually the 1-star reviews tend to be shaved apes who somehow came upon a keyboard. But you take those 1-star reviews very seriously because your rationale is 5-star is a extreme positive and 1-star is an extreme negative, and you're looking for the both ends of the spectrum as opposed to looking at 3-star reviews. Could you talk a little bit more about mining reviews for information?
Sure. Mining reviews for reader expectations is pretty critical before you write to market. You need to know what people are expecting. So using one of my own books as an example, No Such Thing as Werewolves, the 5-star reviews, people love how I interwove all the science. So instead of just having werewolves, you have scientific reasons for why they exist. I worked in anthropology, and the way all this stuff layers people loved. And I hear that over and over and over. You'll see it in dozens of reviews. You flip that around, and the 1-star reviews almost all say the same thing, and that's that there's inaccuracies in the book, and they point out specifically what those are. I used the wrong helicopters, so they couldn't have been in Vietnam because they didn't exist until the early 80s. Some of my ballistics were off for some of the weapons that I used. So there's an undercurrent of people who know about firearms, know about the military, and were pretty upset with how I presented that information because it was incorrect. It's the same thing. I'm a computer programmer as me looking at how somebody is doing hacking or computers and just totally flubbing it. It knocks you out of the story. So you need to look at negative reviews to see kind of who you're going to piss off by the book that you're writing, and then decide, is it worth fixing that? So in this case, maybe I could have spent another few months learning about ballistics and military hardware, and that probably would have saved me from getting a few 1-star reviews, but the book still sells, a bajillion copies, and I can live with the fact that those people are upset. So it's sort of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 principle. It's good enough. Most of the people that are going to read this are going to be okay with it. And while I could make it perfect, I could spend that time putting out another book.
Yeah, that's so important because, with the Pareto principle, I don't think a lot of people talk about the 80-20 rule, but then they kind of tend to barrel forward. And the thing is, we do strive for perfection when we should be going for excellence. I have to tell you, I I had a book, one of my crime thrillers. The hero ends up underwater in a car, and one of my beta readers said, actually, in that year, that car didn't have automatic locks. I was like, okay.
That was helpful, though.
Thank you. And this is the thing. On the one hand, I was delighted that he knew that weird little detail. On the other hand, I thought, well, yeah, but only he would know that.
Plus, it definitely pulls you out of the story if you remove that element of the doors not auto-locking. It's like, what makes a better story? Like, suspension of disbelief is a thing, folks.
Of course, the other side of that too is you can go so deep into the weeds on research that you end up beating your reader over the head with your research. Like, I did all this research and now I'm going to punish you with it, as opposed to focusing on the story.
I feel like that whenever I read George R. R. Martin with the Game of Thrones. Like, I just feel like he's done so much research on medieval culinary. Well, and also just medieval food. Like, there's just and just like what medieval grass is like. He just goes on and on about describing things to a T, but it's not relevant for a while, and then eventually someone really important to you gets their head cut off, and you're like, God damn it, I hate this book.
That's interesting, because I remember reading the Shipping News, and I started to read through it, and I thought, is this written by a botanist? This is like, we're getting deep into the grasses and the flora here. It's like, where's the story? But I digress. Did we have a question about, actually talking about research, this kind of ties into it. Was it John?
It's from John Monk here. He wants to know if
Hello,
Chris was in the
John.
military, and how hard is your military research?
John and his wife are watching us right now. Hello, John and Dorothy.
Yeah, John's a good friend. So I was not in the military. I know very, very little about the military. I have a friend that I query with questions, and I have another friend that is a hunter. So I rely 100% on what they tell me, and 80% of the time what they tell me is correct. And 20% of the time what they tell me is not, and so I just sort of get punished where they're off.
Maybe they lie to you on purpose, We'll be like, oh, we'll give him 80-20 and see if he notices.
So I'm getting trolled, is what you're saying.
Yes, they're misunderstanding the Pareto principle right there. Did we have another question from the forum while we're looking at the forum?
I'm not sure.
I'm looking for it. Kate Morgan says, no, I refuse to believe I'm not a precious snowflake, and then melts.
Kate, you are a special snowflake. One of the things that Domino Finn says, and I love this, is that we as writers have to pay our dues. So if you look at Brandon Sanderson, he can write whatever he wants. He's at the stage where anything he puts his name on is going to sell because he's a great writer. People trust him and they're going to read those books. But when Brandon first started writing, his fantasy was, I don't want to say formulaic, but was very standard. So you look at Elantris, his first book, and I think we as authors all need to do the same thing. You've got to lay your foundation of books that are similar to other books out there so that you can build up a readership, and then you can put out the super unique series that you've always wanted to work on, because then all the people on your mailing list are going to rush out to buy it because they know you're a good writer.
Well, as far as mailing lists go, I was wondering about your transition, because for people who don't know, you're about to go full-time author and stop being an incredibly successful app developer. So you're breaking your mother's heart, is what I'm saying. But I'm wondering, was there a certain number you had in mind as far as how many email subscribers do I have to have before I even consider going full time, or was there some kind of math involved to your calculation? Because reading your book, I got the feeling you're a very analytical guy.
I love spreadsheets. It's one of the things that I have in common with my fiance. We geek out over spreadsheets. It's quite romantic. And I had a number of analyses that I was doing. The number one analysis was how much income am I averaging each month? And I watched that number slowly creep up, and I made it stay where I wanted it to be for 6 months before I decided this was something I was going to do. So I waited 6 months longer than I needed to. I paid off all my debt. I put a year's worth of expenses in the bank, and I feel pretty comfortable that I can keep that income up, especially since I'll be writing more. And that was the primary factor in deciding to go full time.
Okay. And but you do have a large email list. Can you talk a little bit about how you built that?
Yes. I kind of take an unconventional approach. Right now, people are all about what can I do to get people on the list. You hear people running Facebook ads. There are giveaways happening, Rafflecopter, whatever they can do to inflate that list, and I don't do any of that stuff. I put a mailing list sign up in the front and back of every one of my books, and I offer people a free short story if they sign up, and that's all I do. So I average between 5 and 20 sign-ups a day, depending on how recently I release something. And all of those people are pretty engaged because they've read at least one of my books and liked it, and that's why they're signing up. So my list is probably smaller than it would be if I was doing all the big giveaways, but much, much more engaged, and that's been enormously helpful to my success.
Higher quality and costs a whole lot less. You don't have any deadwood in there.
Right. And for those that are unaware, the bigger your list is, the more expensive it is to email your list. So you'll get to a point where if you have, let's say, 5,000 or 10,000 people, that you're paying $100 to send an email.
Yeah, that really puts it in perspective. And when you write to market, would you say that, I don't know if you've done a whole bunch of Facebook ads or has it been more organic? Because I notice in the book, in the excerpt, I haven't read the whole book yet, with Right to Market, it's not available until, what is it, February 12th?
I'll probably release it before then. I threw it up and gave it that date to give myself enough time to get it polished, but I'd like to have it up by the 5th.
Okay, because one of the things you mentioned in the excerpt is exploiting also bots and looking at also bots as part of your analysis. Can you talk a little bit about how you're writing to market by keeping in mind the organic growth through also bots?
Right. So 98% of your success when you are attempting to write to market as a new author in that genre is going to be how well you can resonate with readers who like that fiction. And so what should happen if you do this well, I'm going to do Facebook ads when I release the military sci-fi to try and get a few initial sales. And if my understanding of the Amazon algorithms is correct, that'll begin to populate in the also bots of people who have purchased other books like it. So those big books out there like Nick Webb's Constitution, Joshua Dalzell's Warship, Yvonne Hepner's books like The Lost Starship, it'll show up in their list too. And so his fans or their fans will start seeing that book. So you'll get that kind of organic discovery. And you can try and force that, but really you're only going to know that you succeeded with your book if it happens on its own. So all you should have to do if you've written a book well enough to market is give it that initial nudge, and then Amazon will take over. And that's exactly what happened with No Such Thing as Werewolves. I wrote the book, I put it out there, it started showing up in the also bots of all the other werewolf books, and before I knew it, it was sort of self-sustaining.
That's really interesting and very seductive, the idea of making it organic so you do less. I love doing less. I'm really good at doing less.
I don't know if you guys had a chance to take a peek at the blog post that I put out today, but it's called Marketing is Farming, Not Hunting. And the idea is that you need to do a lot more things up front and have kind of the slow organic growth, not get into every Facebook group you can and yell "buy my book" with all the other people who are there yelling "buy my book."
Yeah,
if you do it,
the
do it right
planted
up
tree
front.
perspective type of thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You do it right up front.
Should have done it 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. But the second best time to do it is right now.
Yeah, well, actually, this really resonates with me because a lot of gurus that you hear in our circles talk about outworking everyone else, and they say all you have to do. Like Hugh Howey. I love Hugh, I think I might be misquoting him. I might be actually getting it through a filter of another podcaster where they said something like, all you have to do is work harder than everyone else. And I thought, okay, so one person can work harder than everyone else. There's something wrong about the math there. And it's as I was reading Right to Market, I thought, oh, yeah, Chris has got the keys to the gate here as far as getting out of our own way and focusing on what readers want. Because a lot of times we tend to really not pay a whole lot of attention to what readers want. We figure we just because I've often said that to myself. I write for me, and I hope that you get on my crazy train. But maybe I need to make the doors wider to my crazy train.
Well, I think the obvious answer is yes.
Yeah, I hope so.
You just got to plant some seeds and start building that foundation so that the targeted readers will come.
Well, and the other thing we should really reinforce here is you're not suggesting in Right to Market that we don't want anybody to get the idea that you're suggesting that anybody writes something they don't want to write. That's
the first thing that it starts with, yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually a mental block that I've had is I've thought, well, I could write something that's commercial fiction, quote unquote, or I could do my thing, and it's like, well, this is all about me doing my thing. It's like, well, there's room for both as long as I'm enjoying what I'm writing.
Right. If you're not enjoying what you're writing, you can get another easier job in all likelihood that's probably going to pay you a little bit better. I mean, writing is hard work. And my thought is almost all of us have several different intersecting likes, if you will. So a friend of mine by the name of R.M. Webb, she started by writing paranormal vampire books with a little twinge of romance, but they weren't doing terribly well. So she transitioned and started writing something else she was interested in, which was a series about witches, and that one took off and started doing great. And then she got bored with that, so she looked around and she decided she was going to do a more conventional romance. Now, each of those required a lot of research on her part to find the intersection between a genre she wanted to write and a genre that she thought would actually sell, but the core ingredient there is always she wanted to write it. I mean, you can phone it in and write something you're not interested in. I suppose all of us can do, erotica if we think that's the thing that's going to sell the most, but I have to imagine that we're not going to sell as well as the people that actually want to be writing erotica.
Yep.
Do you want to write erotica, or?
I went through a dark phase when I was an MMO player many years ago where I did erotic roleplay, which I'm ashamed to admit now. So I've done that phase and passed on, so yeah, no thanks.
Was it at least hot at the time? Yes. Perfect.
Is he frozen or is he just appalled? Do we have a question from Kate in the forum?
We do. With regards to keywords on Amazon, are you doing anything special / and or unique or new?
I don't know if we can ask them that when he's frozen. Oh, there we go.
I figured he'd come back in a minute.
I'm aghast.
You want to repeat the question for him there, X?
Sure, yeah. Can we hear you? Okay, try talking again.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, we can hear you.
There we go.
Yeah.
So the question is, what am I doing with keywords?
Yes.
So I do the same split on all of my books. I will use some of the keywords to get into categories, and then the balance of them I will do the autocomplete feature on Amazon. So if it's a book about werewolves, I will type in the word werewolf and see what the autocomplete options are, and then pick 2 or 3 of those to use. And I don't think that's going to be any different in writing to market. The beauty of this process is if you write it well enough and you're hitting the right tropes, Amazon's going to do the heavy lifting for you. They're going to figure out who likes your book, and they're going to start recommending it.
Right. Well, that's another example of how it goes organic when Amazon takes over the marketing for you. I love it when Amazon takes over the marketing for me because apparently I suck at it.
So, now that you're going full-time, Chris, and you're obviously now writing to market from now on, so what kind of a schedule are you looking at for the rest of the year, at least?
So I have 12 books scheduled over the next 12 months. Some of those are going to be nonfiction. The nonfiction, like Write to Market, they're shorter, so they're easier to write. Some of them are full-length novels. There's a pretty good mix. But I will be putting out a book every single month between now and the end of the year because I think that sort of production is possible. I think I can do it and have fun with it. And I think that's really what the most lucrative setup is for authors these days. If you're constantly pumping out great content like, the pulp writers of yore, like H.P. Lovecraft and Isaac Asimov, then you just stand a much better chance of making a living at this.
And if listeners are reeling at the idea of 12 books a month, all they have to do is get Chris Fox's book, 5,000 Words Per Hour. Are you familiar with this book, Chris Fox?
I am. I think that the author is a bit of a hack. Obviously,
you would say that.
Oh, that's just jealousy talking.
Self-hatred
You also have,
get you.
yeah, you also have an app for that. Is that correct?
I do. I will warn you that the app is fairly terrible. It's something that I built in my garage, so it does what it's supposed to do fairly well, but it's not pretty.
The carburetor needs tuning or something?
Something like that. Now that I'll be working full-time for myself, I'll probably put a lot more time and love into that app.
Adjust the flux capacitor.
Yeah. You mentioned just in your previous answer that you'll now be making a living as a writer. But what is your living at the moment before you go full-time? What is it that you're giving up, basically, in favor for becoming a full-time writer?
I am giving up a very generous 6-figure salary at a San Francisco startup as their sole iOS developer. So I need to, with my writing, replace that income. So I'm expecting that I should be able to make a good, generous 6 figures for my writing this year. I'm on target to do that. All I have to do is keep doing what I'm doing, I think, and I should get there without any problem.
And aside from the benefit of working in your underwear from home and not doing any commuting, which
or in your office, in my case,
or in your office in your case, well, you're still in your underwear, but but do you think what are the downsides? Do you think of going full time? Are you prepared for that? Because there are people who have, when they go full time, they don't stick to a schedule so much. They tend to procrastinate a bit, and they miss a lot of the social aspect. I'm trying to make somebody who's not full-time feel much better about themselves, obviously.
Well, I've been preparing for this for a few months now. So I told work back in October I want to telecommute 90% of the time, and they agreed. So I've been working from home for all that time and making sure that it works for me. Fortunately, I live with my fiance and her sister is one of my best friends. Her name's Mary. And Lisa and Mary are home all day because Lisa telecommutes. She's got her own business as well. So I get that interaction from them, which is really helpful. It is weird not venturing into the world and seeing people. Some of the people on K-Boards where I announced that I was going to go full-time that have already made that switch warned me that it can be a little bit bizarre in some ways that you didn't expect. Things like you don't really know what day it is anymore because weekends lose all meaning. So I'm not really sure what to expect. Fortunately, I am very schedule-oriented. I wake up at 5 a.m. every morning, no exceptions, and I start out by going to the gym. So I'm going to keep to that routine. Even though I won't need to get up at 5 anymore, I'll keep doing that just because I think that routine will help me keep some sense of sanity.
It's funny how people react to going full-time because when I did it, I felt not like I could goof off at all. I felt like I had to be working all the time. So I had an equal and opposite reaction where I was doing 16, 18 hours a day in the chair for 2 years. I'm still recovering.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't recommend it to anyone.
So my goal...
No, sorry, go ahead.
My goal is to double my current work. So I put in less than 2 hours a day writing and marketing. I'm going to up that to 4.
That sounds entirely reasonable. That leaves a lot of time for peeling grapes and enjoying a lot of mojitos.
And doing research, like watching Battlestar Galactica, playing video games.
Well, and that's one of the things you touched on in the book is authors don't read enough. And I think I want that message to go out there. And since I don't want to have a target on my forehead, I'm going to let you expound on that important point.
Excellent. I will be mean about it. You're not reading enough fiction. I'm looking into the camera. You're not reading enough fiction. The problem that most of the authors I know suffer from is that they want to write fantasy, but they don't read fantasy. If you're not reading the best books in your genre, the ones that are selling the most, then you don't know why they're selling. So one of the things that Right to Market covers at length is you need to pick up at least 3 of the books that are selling incredibly well in your genre before you sit down to write Word 1 and read them. And if you can't find the time to read, make it. Audiobooks are your best friend. You can listen on the treadmill. You can listen on a commute. Find a way to work in a little bit of time, even if it's just 1 chapter a day where you are reading, and your craft will transform.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep, that needs to get out there.
And I think you also touched on, likewise, I read a lot as well, and I think you touched on not only should you be reading specifically what you're hoping to be selling, but also diversify what you're reading. You know, I read a lot of nonfiction as well, and I find no matter what, as much the more words that are going in the brain, the lot going to be coming out. Basically,
Well said.
Read enough, you're going to be typing a lot more.
I totally agree with that. I every day I make time to click random on Wikipedia, and stuff that I run across inevitably makes it into my book somehow.
Yeah, that's a good strategy.
Yeah,
Why
I've been
not?
reading romance recently, which I don't read. It's not something I ever had any familiarity with, but the books are surprisingly good, and it's really fun getting into something that I haven't done before, and I think that you as an author can take something from every genre. So in my case, I'm learning how I can add a dash of romance to any other genre that I write, whereas before I didn't really know the pieces and the tropes well enough to do that, and now I feel like after a few romance books I know how.
Well, and that's a key thing to be throwing in because most tropes, no matter what the genre is, will have, like you just said, a dash of romance. So having that under your belt is pretty important.
Yeah, I don't think that. Well, I think that the reading can't be replaced. But you're talking about sci-fi. There was a book I picked up today, which I was really interested in. It's by Joe Walton, and it's What Makes This Book So Great. It talks about rereading the classics of science fiction and fantasy. So that's what it looks like.
Oh my God, print?
Print,
Wow.
yes. I bought it's hardcover too. I bought a print book. I know, I'm a dinosaur. But it's writing about what makes this book so great, what makes these stories so great. I think there's something that we probably is totally off our radar. Besides reading books, I think we should probably pay some attention to the meta of it and listen to what book critics have to say about books as well. So that's my recommendation, is that book. Take a look. It's interesting. And they mention George R.R. Martin, although George R.R. Martin, she's not talking about his science fiction. She's talking about Westeros, but it is in the science fiction categories. And you mentioned that in the book, Chris, about how sometimes books show up in categories they do not belong. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah, this is a hot button issue for a lot of authors out there. If you write about werewolves or vampires, especially, so if you go to the werewolf categories, like 10 of the top 12 books are going to be shifter erotica that have nothing to do with the category that they're in, and you see this polluting pretty much every category on Amazon, where there are going to be some books that just don't fit. So one of the things that Right to Market teaches is when you're picking out the books that you want to emulate, you need to make sure you're not looking at the number one book in the category just because it's number one. You should be able to tell whether or not it's the actual genre you want to write. So George R. R. Martin's a great example. He's listed as science fiction when quite clearly that's fantasy, and they get away with it because it's George R. R. Martin. He's a household name. But we, I think, are not going to get away with it. So when I'm listing my books in categories, I'm very careful not to put myself in a category where I don't belong, because I found that A, you won't sell copies, and B, if you do sell copies, those people are going to thrash you in the reviews.
You also mentioned that when we're doing that analysis of looking at what's at number 1 and what's at number 20, you also said to ignore books from big publishers and how to identify them, usually by their price, because it's $9.99 for an ebook. But can you tell me a bit more about that, please?
Sure thing. So the reason why I suggest that you're looking for kind of apples to apples and you want self-published authors like you is we can't generate the same kind of push that a traditional publisher can. They could be doing everything from BookBub to making sure that you're featured on 20 of the top blogs in your genre and podcasts and media outlets. You have no idea what sort of blitz they're doing to get exposure on that book. And so the reason why their books are hot is going to be different than the reasons why yours will. So we kind of have to use organic growth because none of us have the marketing budget of the big five. They can just throw money at it and make sure that their super expensive ebook is the top of the chart.
And with Right to Market, was your formulation of your analysis pretty much based all Amazon-centric, or did you check out other platforms as well, like Kobo, for some odd reason, or Apple?
I always take a look at Apple because Apple has been extremely good to me, and I love iBooks as a platform. But every other major book site is more of a boutique site. So the people running the site are picking what books people are seeing, not the search algorithms. So they get lambasted a lot on everybody from Kobo to Apple that their search engine is not robust enough. So the kind of manipulation you can do on Amazon to get your book seen is not going to work well on other sites. However, the same kind of analysis will work. If your book is going to be written to market on Amazon, it's almost certainly going to play well on other outlets as well, because if you get the secret sauce right, readers, it doesn't matter what platform they find your book on, if they like, book A that's hot in that genre, they're going to like yours.
Do you think that
Secret sauce, folks.
Do you think the analysis might work better on another platform like Apple for different genres?
It's possible. I tend to think no, only because Amazon is the second best search engine in the world, and that's really what you're working with is their recommendation engine. Apple's recommendation engine is much less robust, and I think everybody else is worse than Apple, besides Amazon, obviously.
Agreed. Yeah.
Well, we know that Kobo will prefer to push people whose books are higher priced as opposed to, what the books are actually about or that kind of thing. So.
And or those people with whom they've developed a relationship. That's kind of reverse gaming the system, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be Kobo's friend. and this, both Robert and I are being sarcastic about this, and we're Canadian.
Yeah.
It all makes sense now.
Yeah.
Actually, we're more bitter than we are Canadian.
Yes, that's very, 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 very true. Very true. 3/4 bitter, 1/4 Canadian.
Kobo's owned by the Japanese now, so Canada doesn't have too much to do with it anymore, does it?
Nope.
Did we have any more questions from the forum before we clear up? Because we've got about 8 minutes left.
Jamie asks, "Is the secret sauce Thousand Islands dressing?"
It's a secret. If you pay me $2.99, I will tell you what the secret sauce is.
And is that the price of your book that's currently on pre-order on Amazon?
It just so happens that it is. All
Wow.
joking aside, the secret sauce is something we all have to figure out for ourselves. I can sort of give you in this book the pieces necessary for you to do that research, but every author needs to sit down and do the work. I think that it's achievable that regardless of what genre you're writing in, you can figure that secret sauce out. And there absolutely is a secret sauce in everything from romance to epic fantasy.
Yeah, what you're recommending, there are exercises at the end of each chapter, and there is a little bit of research, but this is reconnaissance that if as soon as I started reading it, I thought, oh, this is an ugly journey of self-discovery. I hate myself now. This is what I've been doing wrong. Oh yeah, when that was a success, totally accidentally. Good for me. So.
It's so hard to hold up that mirror and be like, oh my god, I've been doing this wrong. And we're taught everywhere that writing to market is selling out. It makes you a terrible person. So when the gears begin to turn in your head and it starts clicking into place and you realize, yeah, this is the way I need to sell books and get happy readers, there's definitely a conflict inside because I think we were all raised to think that the Dan Browns of the world are doing it wrong and are selling out and that we shouldn't do that.
Yeah, and as soon as you mentioned Dan Brown, a lot of people are shaking their heads going, no, that's right, don't sell out!
And I don't think you have to. I think that you can write a beautifully crafted story that is wonderful and amazing, but still is written to market.
Yeah, I think this brings me back to university days where I'd listened to somebody pontificate about how, well, I really loved them in punk rock before they went mainstream, and now that everybody loves them, it's awful, which is a real elitist sort of thing to say, but it is something that, it's not selling out, it's buying in, and it's getting more readers, and as long as you're still having fun writing it, then you haven't sold your soul.
Because you're essentially just looking up to see what the expectations are of the readers who read these genres and subgenres, so that you can include some or lots of them in your book to ensure that they're actually going to like your book, while you're also writing what you like writing. It's not it's not terribly difficult. It's just terribly difficult for us to hear that message after so long of being told to be an artist, be creative, write something unique, write what you want to write, and follow your dreams. It's more turning off, realizing it's denial, and listening in and actually trying to understand what it is, instead of just going off and mixing up random genres that really possibly couldn't be mixed up.
But you're not suggesting that anybody write to a formula. It is same thing, only different. It is recognizing the tropes, but then introducing new elements to it.
Exactly. Because if you try and rehash it, readers are going to know, and you can't just follow a checklist and put out your cookie cutter book, because no one's going to buy it. Readers are far more savvy than that. You've got to have the same level of artistry. You're just writing a little more informed, maybe, than you are right now.
I guess touching on looking for those types of tropes, the things that at least mindless of genre or whatever, or no matter what, you're looking for things story-wise or character-wise that people are attached to. Is there such thing as going for too many tropes?
Depends on the genre. So some genres are much more forgiving of mishmashes, I guess, of a whole bunch of different tropes. I would say that epic fantasy is one of them. So epic fantasy readers are hard to win over because they know there's going to be a big investment in reading a long series, but they don't need the series to be quite like anything that exists currently. So if you look at anything from Mistborn to George R.R. Martin's books, they're radically different with different worlds and different writing styles, and yet the same readers will pick them up and love them. So for genres like epic fantasy, you can go nuts and you can have a whole bunch of tropes, but For most other genres, that's not true, and regardless of what genre you write in, see if somebody else has done it first. If you see a book out there that's really hot, that's got 50 different tropes in it mixed up, maybe you can do the same.
Good advice.
Yeah. I really like being more. I guess I'm looking at reviews in a different way now that I've read that excerpt of your book, because I'm thinking, when the lady who said, "Oh, this is too much like The Stand," I wrote a book called This Plague of Days, and I said, "Oh, this is too much like The Stand," and she was complaining, and I thought, oh, well, I did position it like, The Stand is one of my inspirations, but it's in many ways not at all like The Stand. It's just it kind of followed that structure. But she was complaining about something that I loved, so I kind of wrote it off. But now I'm taking that information in a kind of a different light now and going, okay, well, it was too reminiscent of something she didn't like, and I can kind of be a little more relaxed about that review now, seeing it in that light.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at Nick Webb's Constitution, with the people complaining about Battlestar Galactica, for every person that didn't like the fact that it was similar to Battlestar Galactica, 50 to 100 loved it. And I'm sure that's true of your book as well.
Yeah, that's something that we really have to, because I actually paid too much attention to somebody who said, "Oh, I don't like cereals," and so I got out of cereals early when it was actually serving me. This was a few years ago. I don't recommend anybody do it now necessarily, and I wouldn't do it now. But at the time, it was great. But I heard a couple voices saying, "Oh, I hate cereals," and therefore I ran away from it instead of going, "No, I do cereals," because most people would dig it, or most people can deal with it. And there's also the thing about cliffhangers. Some people say, "Well, I hate cliffhangers," but we've had the same discussion about pop-ups on your website. Everybody says they hate them, and they all work. So you'll have people who hate a cliffhanger.
Next book.
Sorry, what was that, Erica?
They say, I don't like cliffhangers, but then they go off and they buy the next book. So
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's one of those criticisms that I think is a little bit overblown, because anybody who watches The Walking Dead, the cliffhanger is coming. You're going to be left hanging in the last minute of the episode, and you will be pissed off. But you're never so pissed off that you don't come back. So at least about the cliffhanger.
And the cliffhanger itself is a trope in itself. That comes relevant to what you're writing. Like I think you'd mentioned it in the excerpt that with going for military sci-fi, you kind of go for more of a self-contained adventure, and it's a happy ending, but there probably was a big cost. Whereas the cliffhangers, as far as those things, that is not so typical of that genre, and therefore probably would throw readers off.
Exactly. It'll really upset readers of certain genres, whereas other ones are way more okay with it. So if you look at cozy mysteries, for example, you don't even have the option of doing a cliffhanger on a cozy mystery. If you don't wrap everything up, then, people are going to destroy your book in the reviews.
Yes, they also won't appreciate it if everyone is dead on the floor covered in blood. Sadly.
not in a cozy, no.
No. Yes. No one ever ends a romance with the hero turning out to be a serial killer pedophile. It's really weird, isn't it?
Yeah, that was the case that you should have been investigating the entire time. You should have been investigating the investigator.
And with that, Erica, you want to call it, because we are coming down to the end of the self-publishing roundtable with. That's your cue. I'm pointing at you.
I know, but you made me panic. I don't know what I'm supposed to say now.
Oh no!
But thank you, Chris, for coming on the show again. And do you want to plug your website or anything like that quickly before we leave?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me on the show, first off. You can check out my work at chrisfoxwrites.com. I just threw up a blog article today that is of interest to anyone wanting to learn a little bit more about marketing, And if you want to pick up Right to Market, that's available for pre-order on Amazon and iTunes.
Good plug.
Yeah. Okay, and thank you also for Robert for coming in and being a special guest host for us today while Wade and Liam were away. Thank you, Robert.
Yes. Thank you for having me, and Wade and Liam, I hope you enjoy your romantic weekend in the Poconos. That was very nice, and I'm glad to step in anytime you guys want to get away. That's okay. You can find me at allthatjazz.com. Jazz is with 2 Z's, 2 Z's if you're nasty.
Okay, and from me, Erica, bye-bye. And also, X, what do we end with?
Oh, good night, internets, and be sure to check out our Sunday show at, I think, 5
5 p.m.
p.m.
Eastern.
5 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. PST. So, yeah, join us on Sunday. Otherwise, yeah, good night, internets.
Bye.
Good night, internets.